Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. In this video, I will teach you Train to Pakistan, which is a historical novel by the Indian novelist Khushwant Singh. So without any further delay, let's get into the video. So now let's see Khushwant Singh as a writer. Khushwant Singh, born on 2nd February 1915, was an Indian author, lawyer, diplomat, journalist and politician. His experience in the 1947 partition of India inspired him to write Train to Pakistan in 1956, which was also made into the film in 1998 and which became his most well-known novel. He was born in Punjab. Khushwant Singh was educated in Modern School, New Delhi, St. Stephen's College, and he was graduated from Government College, Lahore. He studied at King's College, London and was awarded an LLB degree from University of London. He was called to the bar at the London Inner Temple, and after working as a lawyer in Lahore High Court for almost 8 years, he joined the Indian Foreign Service upon the independence of India from British Empire in 1947. He was appointed journalist in the All India Radio in 1951, and then he moved to the Department of Mass Communications of UNESCO at Paris in 1956. These last two careers encouraged him to pursue a literary career, and as a writer, he was best known for his stringent secularism, humor, sarcasm, and an abiding love of poetry. His comparisons of social and behavioral characteristics of Westerners and Indians are laced with acid wit. He served as the editor of several literary and news magazines as well as two newspapers through the 1970s and 1980s. Between 1980 and 1986, he served as Member of Parliament in Rajya Sabha, the upper house of the Parliament of India. Khushwant Singh was awarded the Padma Bhushan in 1974. However, he returned the award in 1984 in protest against Operation Blue Star, in which the Indian Army raided Amritsar. And in 2007, he was awarded the Padma Vibhushan, the second highest civilian award in India. Now let's look at the introduction to Train to Pakistan. So Train to Pakistan is a 1956 historical novel by Indian novelist Khushwant Singh. It was set during the 1947 partition of India that created the nations of Pakistan and India. It focuses on the way partition impacted the people on the ground, focusing on the lives of ordinary citizens as they were torn from their homes. Train to Pakistan brings a human dimension to one of the bloodiest periods in the history of the two countries. And before the 1947 partition, Hindus, Muslims and Sikhs, they lived side by side despite occasional conflict and violence. And partition set such religious and cultural differences in stone, and families were forced to abandon their homes, moving to areas that were deemed safe for those of the religious belief. However, the resettlement process itself was filled with danger as extremist elements sought to take advantage of the chaos. And this ad hoc evacuations took place on foot, via cart, and on crowded trains. And as these refugees attempted to escape the violence, they would soon become caught up in the ongoing civil war between Hindus and Muslims. Although many refugees sought safety in the countryside, far away from the center of the violence, rural areas were filled with danger as well, as tribal gangs targeted refugees. And in all, it is estimated that almost 10 million people were relocated during the conflict. And of those, more than 1 million were killed in the violence that erupted during the resettlement process. And through this all, the trains continued to run, shuttling refugees along a dangerous path. The trains became targets themselves, as both sides in the civil war saw them as an effective way of killing large number of refugees. They became known as ghost trains or funeral trains. Many villages, such as Manu Majra, where the majority of the novel takes place, relied on supply trains, and the trains' arrivals and departures structured daily life in the villages. And as the war progressed, the trains became more and more irregular and were often filled with more refugees than the small villages could handle. And as the chaos in the center of the country increasingly reached the rural villages, Fear crept into the villages and touched every aspect of their lives. In Manamajra, life was still fairly peaceful, and the village was religiously diverse with a population of Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, and Christians. For hundreds of years, the village existed in a spirit of cooperation, and the people relied on each other for their survival. The religious conflict taking place in the urban center seemed a million miles away until the arrival of the first ghost train. The train carries many corpses, and the villagers are overcome, is captivated by horror. A second train arrives soon afterwards, and with it more changes for the village. They are soon ordered by soldiers to help bury the dead before the start of monsoon season. And soon the fragile peace among religions in the village is broken, as the Muslim citizens in the village are ordered to evacuate. Stripped of their belongings, families that have lived in Mano Majra for generations are exiled with only the possessions they can carry. And although the Muslims suffer the burnt of the soldiers' authority, the soldiers have plans for the Sikh and Hindu populations as well. An attack is planned on the next train to Pakistan, and the Hindu and Sikh citizens are drafted into it. The soldiers will strike the train with gunfire, and when people flee the train, the villagers will attack them and finish them off. The horror of this plan is emphasized when the villagers realize that this next train will not be carrying Muslim citizens but people from their village. They are being ordered to attack their own friends and neighbors. One man, a Sikh thief named Jagga, is horrified to realize that his bride-to-be, a Muslim woman, will be on the train as well. So in the face of this violent attack, the citizens of Manamajra are forced to confront the beginnings of ethnic cleansing in the nation. Jagga, a man who has been complicit in violence in the past, is forced to decide if this is the time to take a stand or if violence is now inevitable. The crisis of faith he experiences as he struggles to rise above the current climate of hatred and stand up for his friends and neighbors is the crux of Train to Pakistan. So basically, Train to Pakistan remains one of the seminal works dealing with the partition of India. And it also explores themes of love, religion, and alliance. Khushwant Singh paints a picture of a village where no one is either pure evil or pure good. Jagga, a deeply flawed man, represents the idea that during periods of religious and political conflict, people can choose to walk a different path, even if the cost is high. Now let's look at the plot of Train to Pakistan. So basically, Mano Majra, the fictional village on the border of Pakistan and India, in which the story takes place, is predominantly Muslim and Sikh. Khushwant Singh shows how they lived in a bubble surrounded by mobs of Muslims who hate Sikhs and mobs of Sikhs who hate Muslims. So while in the village they had always lived together peacefully, villagers were in the dark about happenings of larger scope than the village outskirts, gaining much of their information through rumor and word of mouth. And this made them especially susceptible to outside views. And upon learning that the government was planning to transport Muslims from Manamajra to Pakistan the next day for their safety, one Muslim said, "What have we to do with Pakistan? We were born here, so we are ancestors. We lived among Sikhs as brothers." Jagat Singh, Jagga, a local Sikh, has a Muslim lover Nuran who lives for the refugee camp. And after the Muslims leave to a refugee camp from where they will eventually go to Pakistan, a group of religious agitators comes to Mano Majra and instills in the local Sikhs a hatred for Muslims, and they convinces a local gang to attempt mass murder as the Muslims live on their train to Pakistan. Jagga, knowing Nuran is in one of the rail cars, acts on instinct and sacrifices life to save the train. Now let's look at the analysis of Train to Pakistan. So now let's look at the social structure and cultural understanding among the people about the book. So basically, in a relatively short book, the reader gets to know a lot of characters in detail. Examination of the varied groups of people then not only increases cultural and social understanding of that time and place, but also shows that the blame could not be placed on any one group and all were responsible. Muslims said that the Hindus had planned and stated the killing, and according to the Hindus, the Muslims were to be blamed. So the fact is both sides killed, both shot and stabbed and speared and clubbed. and both were tortured, both were raped. So, if the groups of people are examined on a closer level, then the religious attachments, a more detailed social structure emerges. And government officials were corrupt, manipulative of villagers, and could arrest anyone they chose for any reason, more often than not for their own benefit. They did just enough in terms of dealing with the dispute so that nobody could say that they did not do anything. The law enforcement was completely at the whim of the local government, meaning that in practice there was no law, and also small amounts of educated people trickled in and out of villages, trying to instill in people democratic, communist, or other Western ideologies. And though the common people were turned off and confused by the unorthodoxy. So, when one such educated man was speaking to a villager about freedom, the villager explained, "Freedom is for the educated people who fought for it. We were slaves of the English. Now we will be slaves of the educated Indians or the Pakistanis." So, to better understand the situation surrounding the partition of India, Singh provides information about both religions involved. The book sheds light on the various religious practices of both Sikhs and Muslims in rural India. Khushwant Singh also describes daily life for individuals from both practices. For example, Singh describes the practice of prayer for Muslims. The mullah at the mosque knows that it is the time for the morning prayer. He has a quick wash. He stands facing west towards Mecca and with his fingers in his ears cries in long sonorous notes, "Allahu Akbar." Singh points out practices of Sikhs as well. The priest at the Sikh temple lies in bed till the mullah has called. Then he too gets up and draws a bucket of water from the well in the temple courtyard and then pours it over himself and intones his prayer in monotonous sing-song to the sound of splashing water. Now let's look at the moral message and character development in Train to Pakistan. So basically the story is an extract from the novel published in 1956. It talks about how partition affected a small village where people from all religions and sects once lived in harmony. And more than giving the details of partition, Khushwant Singh has recounted what impact it had on people. And in addition to giving an understanding of human actions and pointing out that everyone was responsible, Singh makes a background moral commentary which bubbles up through main characters in their thoughts and their actions. Hukum Chand is the district magistrate and one of the main characters in the story. It becomes apparent that he is a man in moral conflict who has probably used his power over the years with much corruption. He is often described with a dirty physical appearance as if he is overwhelmed with unclean actions and sins and is just as often trying to wash himself of them. Similar to Pontius Pilate after Christ was condemned. Hukum Chand's ethical issues are shown in one of the repeated encounters he has with two geckos, which likely represent Muslims and Hindus in conflict on the verge of fighting each other. And when they start fighting, they fall right next to him and he panics. So the guilt he gets from not helping when he has more than enough power to do so literally jumps onto him. Alcoholism is another tool that Hukum Chand uses in attempt to clean his conscience. He feels the guilt of his actions by day and relieved of them by night when his alcohol is able to justify tirade with a teenage prostitute the same age as his deceased daughter. In all his conflictions, he is able to acknowledge that what he is doing is bad, but is still unable to promote good. The two other main characters that are given a lot of attention are Iqbal Singh and Jagat Singh, and are likely meant to be contrasted. Iqbal is described as a slightly effeminate, well-educated, and atheist social worker from Britain who thinks politically and also cynically, whereas Jagat is a towering, muscular, and uneducated villager who places action over thought and is known for frequent arrests and gang problems. As if to warm them up for comparison, they were both arrested for the same murder they did not commit and were placed in adjacent cells. And upon their release, they learned that a gang was planning to attack the train, taking Mano Majra's Muslim population to Pakistan and kill the passengers. And Jugat's Muslim lover Nooran is also supposed to be on that train. They each had the potential to save the train, though it was recognized that this may cost their lives. So Jagat nevertheless acts on instinct and sacrifices his life to save the train. Iqbal spends pages wondering to himself whether he should do something, exposing a moral paradox on the way. So the questions of right versus wrong, which Khushwant Singh possesses throughout the book, are numerous, including those of what one should do when one has the opportunity to prevent something bad, and when an act of goodwill is truly worthwhile, and how much importance is the consciousness of the bad. So basically, Train to Pakistan, with its multiple gruesome and explicit accounts of death, torture, and rape for the public to read, makes the case that people do need to know about the bad. Now let's see politics in Train to Pakistan. So basically, Khushwant Singh does not describe the politics of the partition in much detail. This is mostly because his purpose is to bring out the individual, human element and provide a social understanding. The two aspects of historical events which tend to be either ignored or not covered effectively in texts. So in the partition, the major change was political. The partition of India into Hindu India and Muslim Pakistan. So the effect of the change, however, was significant, and as Singh has shown, frighteningly social as religious groups rearranged and clashed violently. So Khushwant Singh makes it clear that many people played a part in this chaos and everyone was equally worthy of blame, all while integrating examples of the sheer moral confusion which arises from trying to make sense of an event as momentous as the partition. Now let's look at the characters in Train to Pakistan by Khushwant Singh. So the first character that we have is Iqbal Singh. So basically Iqbal Singh, he is a young Sikh who was educated abroad. Iqbal Singh is now a left-wing politician activist who comes to the rural village of Mano Majra to educate and organize the people there. So from the moment of his arrival, he is viewed with suspicion by the people of the village with the exception of Sikh leader Meet Singh. He is a political agitator who encourages peasants to demand more political and economic rights. He identifies himself as a comrade, which suggests that he is part of the communist organization. Iqbal is a Sikh, given his last name and the band he wears, but does not practice the religion anymore. He is portrayed throughout the novel as Muslim. Iqbal has an affinity for English costumes and practices. His countrymen's code of morals had always puzzled him, with his anglicized way of looking at things. The Punjabi's code was even more baffling. For them, truth, honor, financial integrity were all right. And the next character that we have is Jagat Singh. So Jagat Singh, he is also known as Jagga, is one of the major characters in the book. He is a local criminal and the son of a robber and murderer. He is viewed with suspicion by most of the people in Mano Majra. Jagga is described as a badmash, a bad man by others, but ultimately becomes a hero and one of the central protagonists and in many ways a foil to Iqbal. Jagga seeks to redeem himself over the course of the novel. He is framed for the dacoity and is also used as a scapegoat for the police and abused by many in Mano Majra. But Jagga is also an honest man and he tends to change his ways once he falls in love with Nuran. His crude language and wordplay often contradicts his inner morality. His love for his widowed mother and for the Muslim girl Nuran motivates him to try to do the right thing. But his rage at the gang leader Malli turns him back towards anger and violence. Jagga is mistakenly arrested for a robbery and murder in the village. His fate becomes entangled with the young activist Iqbal until they return to the village shortly before the planned attack on the train to Pakistan. And as one of the four main male characters of the book, his fate is left unknown, and it is unclear if his love for and determination to protect Nuran led him to make the ultimate sacrifice on the railway bridge. Then the next character that we have is Hukum Chand. So basically Hukum Chand is a deputy commissioner in Mano Majra and he has authority over the sub-inspector and the head constable. His daughter along with other members of his family have died, but it's not clear how. Her death deeply affects him and fuels his detached, utilitarian style of policing. He centers on saving as many lives as possible at any cost. And this includes restricting the freedom of the people to keep them safe, that is from imprisoning Jagga and Iqbal despite knowing that they are innocent. He is described as depressed and is deeply marked by the violence of the partition. For example, When Hukum Chand is reflecting on the train massacre, he focuses on his memories of the bodies. They haunt him despite his efforts to remove them from his mind. And furthermore, he is obsessed with death, viewing it as the only absolute truth. He is afraid that when someone dies, their existence no longer matters. And when he recalls the train, he can only imagine the utter terror felt by the passengers, which manifests in a belief that life must be made as pleasurable as possible through hedonistic behaviors. Then the next character that we have is Meet Singh. Meet Singh is an old Sikh priest who privately admits that he joined the clergy only to avoid regular work. And Meet Singh is a friend of both Iqbal Singh and Imam Baksh, and a relationship that is described as having an undercurrent of friendly rivalry. Meet was born a peasant and lives off earnings from a smaller parcel of land that he leases out, as well as the offsprings from the temple. He has no wife or children, and for a priest, he is not particularly learned in the Sikh scriptures, nor is he a gifted orator. He is described as short, fat, and hairy, and he is also unkempt and seldom wears a shirt, instead donning only a pair of dirty shorts. He opposes the plot to kill the train of refugees heading to Pakistan, but ultimately finds that his role as an old bhai makes his protest futile. Then the next character that we have is Lala Ramlal. He is a wealthy Hindu in Mano Majra. Then Jagat Singh describes him as the village banyan or moneylender. And then after being beaten and dropped by Malli and his gang, Ramlal dies from a stab wound to the stomach. And in jail, Jagat tells Iqbal Singh that he could not be so cruel as to kill Ramlal, for he had given Jagat money once to pay lawyers while his father Alam was in jail. Then the next character that we have is Jagat's mother. So Jagat's mother, who is not named, lives with a son and disapproves of his relationship with Nuran. She begs him not to leave their home to see Nuran on the night of the dacoity. And later, when the police arrives at her home to arrest Jagat, she begs them not to take him away. And when Nuran discovers that Jagat has impregnated her, she goes to Jagat's mother for help. The conversation results in an end to Jagat's mother's hostility towards Nuran, who refers to the elder woman as Bebe. Now let's look at the themes in Train to Pakistan. So the first theme that we have is power and corruption. So Iqbal Singh and Jagat Singh are two men of different castes who end up sharing a cell together, both imprisoned on the false charge of conspiring to commit the dacoit against the Hindu landowner Lala Ramlal. So both Iqbal and Jagat are easy targets of the corrupt local police who have no justification for imprisoning either man and arrest them simply because it is politically expedient and they can. So Iqbal represents a threat to establish authority, while Jagat, already a known criminal in the village, is a convenient scapegoat for the avoidance of investigative work. So through the experiences of this man, the novel depicts a country in which police powers are broad, unchecked, and abusive. And this corruption is also a key to maintaining a caste system in which many Indians are guaranteed to remain poor and powerless. Then the next theme that we have is gender and masculinity. So even as love proves a powerful force within the desperate world of A Train to Pakistan, women in this story are routinely denied autonomy and defined primarily by the relationships to men. And at the same time, men in this story are subject to stringent expectations of masculinity that shape their prevalence towards violence. And by highlighting the highly restrictive attitudes that prescribe both male and female behavior throughout the novel, Khushwant Singh suggests that, in addition to religious and caste tensions, gender prejudice is heavily to blame for the horrors following the partition. Women in this story lack their own subjectivity when they are discussed. It is in the context of their relationships to men. Even Nuran, who is more fully detailed than other female characters in the novel, is defined as Jagat's lover and the daughter of the Muslim weaver Imam Baksh. Jagat's mother, who is given no name at all, though Nuran calls her baby, a reference to her status as a female elder and a term that reinforces her role as a nurturer. Muslim prostitute Hasina is perhaps the most powerless female character in this story, whose thoughts and feelings are filtered through a client, Hukumjan's perceptions of her. And these characterizations of women reinforce the notion that they lack individual agency. Then the next theme that we have is the partition of India and religious warfare. So Khushwant Singh's historical novel, A Train to Pakistan, is set in the fictional town of Mano Majra during the summer of 1947, the year of the infamously bloody partition of India. And following World War II, the Great Britain granted its former colony independence and then divided it into the states of India and Pakistan, an attempt to dispel bitter religious tensions by providing a separate homeland for Indian Muslims. Murderous chaos ensued, however, as millions of Muslims attempted to cross the partition into Pakistan and Hindus and Sikhs into India. Khushwant Singh uses the tiny frontier village of Mano Majra, once an oasis of peace, as a microcosm of the religious, caste, and moral divisions that had long existed but were exposed during the nation's literal rift. Khushwant Singh suggests that the violence that erupted from India's partition had less to do with outside influences and more to do with the willingness of people to succumb to pre-existing prejudice and hatred. So with this, we have come to the conclusion. So The Train to Pakistan is a short story about a fictional village and how it gets affected by the partition between India and Pakistan. The separation of Hindustan and Pakistan has increased the misunderstandings between all religions. The story ends with the heroic and sacrificed rescue of the train headed towards Pakistan by an unknown person. And although that mysterious person is shot down and mutilated by the train, it is said that he was successful in cutting the rope. So basically the story is an extract from the novel published in 1956. It talks about how partition affected a small village where people from all religions and sects once lived in harmony. And more than giving the details of partition, Khushwant Singh has recounted what impact it had on people. So basically it recounts the partition of India in August 1947 through the perspective of Mano Majra, a fictional border village, and instead of depicting the partition in terms of only the political events surrounding it, Khushwant Singh digs into a deep local focus, providing a human dimension which brings to the event a sense of reality, horror, and believability. And in addition to giving an understanding of human actions and pointing out that everyone was responsible, Khushwant Singh makes a background moral commentary which bubbles up through main characters in their thoughts and their actions. So friends, I hope you enjoyed this video on Train to Pakistan by Khushwant Singh and learned a lot. So you can continue studying with me by subscribing to my channel. Thank you for watching.